We all know deep down there are moments when we try to avoid facing the truth. It's almost as if by turning a blind eye to the harsh realities of life, we can protect ourselves from the weight of them. But here's the thing, no matter how hard you try to convince yourself that things aren't the way they are, the truth has this sneaky way of revealing itself eventually. It doesn't matter how cleverly you mask it or how long you ignore it. The truth is relentless, and pretending it doesn't exist only causes more harm in the long run. When we choose to deceive ourselves, it's almost like we're playing a game of mental gymnastics. We lie to ourselves because we believe it will protect us from discomfort, failure, or even the fear of judgment. Yet this strategy of self-preservation only traps us in a cycle where we are never truly free. We are stuck in a narrative that we've built up to protect our fragile sense of security. But you can't build your life on falsehoods without them eventually crumbling beneath you. Now, facing the truth doesn't mean you're guaranteed to immediately feel better or more comfortable. In fact, it can often feel like the complete opposite. The truth about yourself, your circumstances, your past, it's not always easy to stomach. But here's the kicker, it's the only way to truly grow. Think about it for a second. You can't fix a problem if you don't acknowledge it exists. It's like trying to repair a leak in a pipe while pretending it's not there. You'll patch one spot, but the water will just find another way to escape. Consider the moments when you've realized, perhaps too late, that you've been lying to yourself. Maybe you convinced yourself that you were fine in a relationship that was draining you, or you told yourself that you'd deal with that issue later. We all do it. We pretend things are okay when, deep down, we know they aren't. We delay making hard decisions because facing the truth would mean taking responsibility. And responsibility often feels like a burden. But in reality, avoiding the truth doesn't protect you. It weakens you. The longer you delay confronting what you know to be true, the harder it becomes to act when the moment finally arrives. The discomfort you're avoiding today will only be worse tomorrow because you've allowed the problem to grow unchecked. Let's take a deeper look at this from another angle. Self-deception is a way of maintaining a false sense of control. If you can convince yourself that everything is fine, that you don't need to make changes, that the problem will resolve on its own, then you don't have to do anything. You get to live in a comfortable lie, but comfort is often the enemy of progress. The truth, on the other hand, challenges you. It calls you to act, to make hard choices, and to take responsibility for your life. And yes, sometimes the truth is hard to face. But in the long run, it's always the truth that empowers you. It's the truth that clears the fog and allows you to see things clearly. It's the truth that gives you the courage to move forward, even when you don't have all the answers. Sure, you might feel vulnerable or exposed, but being vulnerable is far better than staying trapped in an illusion. Think about the moments in your life when you've confronted something difficult head-on. Maybe it was something about your career, your relationships, or even yourself. In those moments, you felt a sense of relief. It wasn't easy, but you felt free. You felt like a weight had been lifted because finally you were no longer lying to yourself. You had stepped into the light, and while it might have stung for a moment, it also allowed you to take action. The irony is that by facing the truth, you free yourself. You release yourself from the constant mental burden of pretending. It doesn't matter how uncomfortable it is at first. Once you accept the truth, you can move forward with clarity and purpose. There's a certain power in that. You stop being controlled by the lies you've told yourself. Instead, you become the one in control of your narrative. Self-deception might give you a temporary sense of safety or security, but that's all it is, temporary. And eventually, when reality catches up to you, the consequences of those lies can be far worse than if you had just faced the truth from the start. The lies only make things more complicated, more tangled, and harder to navigate. But when you choose honesty with yourself, you're not just facing what is, you're setting yourself up to create what can be. So embrace the truth even when it feels like a heavy burden. Recognize that the discomfort you feel in the moment is the price of freedom. The cost of lying to yourself is far greater than the pain of facing the truth. And remember, when you confront the truth, you don't just survive. You become stronger, more resilient, and more capable of handling whatever life throws at you. It's time to stop hiding behind the lies. You owe it to yourself to face the truth, even if it's uncomfortable. Because the moment you do, you'll find the clarity you need to take the next step in your life. And that is where real change begins. It's easy to think that we know ourselves. We live in our own minds every single day. So surely we should have a clear understanding of our motives, desires, and actions. But the truth is, our motivations are often much more complex than we give them credit for. And because of that complexity, we frequently deceive ourselves about the reasons we do what we do. When you take a closer look at why you lie to yourself, it often boils down to a desire for self-protection. It's not that you want to be dishonest or intentionally mislead yourself. It's that the truth can feel too painful, too confronting, too threatening to your self-image. So you build up a facade, a story you tell yourself that's more comfortable, even if it's not entirely accurate. We're all guilty of this to some extent. You might tell yourself you're happy in a situation when deep down you know you're not. Or you convince yourself that your actions don't have consequences, even though you've seen them play out before. The human mind is incredibly skilled at justifying its behavior. The mind has a tendency to rationalize, to protect the ego, to keep things running smoothly even when they're not. And that's where the real danger lies, because once you begin to deceive yourself, you lose the ability to see things clearly. You stop making decisions based on reality, and instead, you start making decisions based on a distorted version of reality. Think about how easy it is to convince yourself that something you know isn't right is somehow okay. Whether it's staying in a toxic relationship, refusing to deal with a problem at work, or avoiding the hard truths about yourself, we often find ways to make our lives seem less difficult than they really are. The truth can feel like an attack on everything you've worked for, and the mind doesn't like feeling threatened. It wants to maintain the status quo, even if the status quo is unhealthy. The key to breaking this cycle is being willing to face the discomfort of honesty. But here's the thing, facing the truth doesn't always mean you'll instantly feel better. In fact, it often feels worse before it gets better. But that's where real growth comes from. You can't fix a problem until you first acknowledge that it exists. You can't improve if you don't have a clear and honest understanding of your starting point. One of the most profound realizations comes when you accept that your motivation to avoid the truth is rooted in fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, or fear of being exposed for who you really are. And let's not forget the fear of being vulnerable. It's scary to acknowledge that you might not be as put together as you like to think. But once you understand that fear is at the root of your self-deception, you begin to understand that it's not the truth that's the problem. It's your relationship with the truth. Most people lie to themselves because they're afraid of the consequences of acknowledging certain truths. Maybe you don't want to face the fact that you've been neglecting your health. Or maybe you don't want to admit that you're unhappy in your career. These are truths that can cause discomfort, but they are also the truths that offer the opportunity for change. You see, avoiding the truth only keeps you stuck in place. But when you confront the reality of a situation, it can force you into action. It can force you to make a choice, to make a change, or to take responsibility for the choices you've made up to that point. This idea of understanding your motivations isn't just about identifying the lies you tell yourself. It's about getting honest with why you tell them in the first place. The more you understand why you deceive yourself, the better equipped you are to break free from the cycle. The first step is recognizing that self-deception isn't something that happens overnight. It's a gradual process. It starts with small lies, perhaps telling yourself that you'll deal with something later or convincing yourself that the problem will go away on its own. But over time, these small lies begin to add up. And when you're faced with a much bigger issue, you're not prepared to handle it because you've been living in a state of self-deception. And this doesn't just apply to external things like relationships or careers. It applies to internal struggles as well. It's easy to tell yourself that you're fine with how you are, that you're okay with your habits or your personality, even if deep down you know there are areas where you could improve. We all have parts of ourselves that we would rather ignore, parts that we'd prefer to keep hidden, but denying them doesn't make them go away. In fact, the longer you avoid them, the stronger their hold on you becomes. But once you get to the root of why you're deceiving yourself, things start to shift. When you understand your fear, your insecurities, and your need for self-protection, you can begin to dismantle the lies. It's not about being perfect, it's about becoming self-aware. It's about understanding why you do what you do and being willing to confront it, no matter how uncomfortable it might feel. The process of confronting your motivations is ongoing. It's not something you do once and then move on from. It requires consistent reflection, self-honesty, and, most importantly, the willingness to be uncomfortable. But when you stop running from the truth and start facing it head on, you'll find that the very things you were afraid of the consequences of your actions, the uncomfortable emotions, are often not as terrible as you imagined, and more importantly, they give you the power to make real change. By understanding your motivations, you free yourself from the lies you've told yourself. You stop living in a distorted version of reality, and you start living in truth. And with that truth comes the power to change, to grow, and to move forward in a way that aligns with who you truly are. Self-deception isn't a harmless habit. The consequences of lying to yourself aren't always immediately obvious, and that's what makes it so dangerous. Initially, it might seem like you're just avoiding discomfort or protecting your ego, but over time, this avoidance builds up and creates problems that you can no longer ignore. So, what are the consequences of not facing the truth? How does self-deception affect you in the long run? Let's start with something simple. The more you lie to yourself, the more complicated your life becomes. You create this web of untruths, and each lie you tell yourself adds another layer, making it harder and harder to see the world for what it truly is. You might convince yourself that things are fine, that the problem is small, or that everything will work out in the end. But as time passes, the lie grows larger and more difficult to maintain, and eventually, when reality catches up to you, the fallout can be overwhelming. Take, for example, avoiding an important conversation you know you need to have. Maybe you've been putting off talking to someone in your life because you're afraid it will create conflict, or that it might lead to an uncomfortable confrontation. So you tell yourself that it's not really that important or that you'll handle it later. But as time passes, that conversation weighs on you more and more. Every time you think about it, you feel that weight of discomfort, and every time you avoid it, the problem gets bigger. The avoidance becomes its own source of stress, creating a cycle that only compounds over time. The consequence is that you're no longer just avoiding the conversation, you're avoiding the responsibility to act. You start justifying your procrastination, convincing yourself that it's better to leave things as they are. But the longer you leave it, the more complicated the situation becomes. What was once a simple conversation turns into a full-blown issue, and now you have to face the consequences of inaction. This kind of self-deception breeds anxiety. You're living in a state of constant tension, knowing there's something you should address, but telling yourself you'll do it later, only to find that later never comes. Then there's the issue of missed opportunities. When you lie to yourself about your potential, your skills, or your dreams, you end up limiting yourself. If you tell yourself you're fine with your current situation, even though deep down you know you're capable of more, you're essentially closing the door on opportunities for growth. You're saying to yourself, I'll settle for what I have, when what you really need to do is step out of your comfort zone and take risks. But those lies hold you back. They keep you stuck in a life that doesn't challenge you, doesn't push you to be better, and doesn't allow you to reach your full potential. And it's not just about missing opportunities in your career or personal life. Self-deception can also stunt your emotional growth. When you lie to yourself about your feelings or suppress your emotions because you're too afraid to confront them, you end up carrying unresolved issues with you. Emotions that are buried don't just disappear. they show up in unhealthy ways through stress, frustration, or even physical health problems. You might tell yourself that you're fine, that everything's under control, but your body and mind will eventually tell a different story. This is particularly evident when you try to suppress feelings of guilt or shame. We've all been there. There are moments in life where you do something you know isn't right, but instead of owning up to it, you bury it, telling yourself it's not a big deal. But the longer you carry that guilt without addressing it, the more it eats away at your peace of mind. You may be able to convince yourself that you're over it, but deep down, that unresolved emotion is quietly affecting your mental and emotional state. And this only deepens the cycle of self-deception. It's not just about missed opportunities or emotional turmoil. The consequences of lying to yourself often affect your relationships as well. When you refuse to be honest with yourself, you also refuse to be honest with others. If you're deceiving yourself about your own needs or feelings, how can you expect to communicate those needs clearly to the people around you? If you're not being honest with yourself about the things that matter to you, how can you expect to build meaningful, authentic connections with others? Relationships thrive on honesty and self-deception prevents you from offering that honesty. You might tell yourself that everything is fine, that the issues in your relationship aren't a big deal. But in reality, you're only ignoring the deeper issues that will eventually come to the surface. Whether it's ignoring the fact that you're unhappy or refusing to address a breach of trust, these unaddressed issues accumulate over time, often leading to resentment, conflict, and eventually distance. The consequences of this self-deception aren't just personal. They extend to everyone you interact with. Finally, there's the long-term impact on your mental health. Self-deception, at its core, is a form of denial. Denial of the truth, denial of reality, denial of the responsibility you have for your own life. And when you live in denial, you disconnect from the very thing that grounds you, reality itself. The longer you live this way, the more disconnected you become from your true self, and the more your mental health suffers. Anxiety, depression, and feelings of helplessness are often symptoms of a deeper disconnection between what you know to be true and what you're telling yourself. It's all interconnected. The more you lie to yourself, the more your mind becomes overwhelmed with contradictions. You're not living in alignment with your true self, and that creates friction in your inner world. The mind doesn't like living in a state of confusion, and that stress manifests in real, tangible ways. You begin to feel overwhelmed, lost, or even hopeless. In the end, the consequences of self-deception always catch up with you. They might not happen overnight, but they will inevitably reveal themselves, often in ways you never expected. When you avoid confronting the truth, you don't just avoid discomfort, you avoid growth. You avoid the opportunity to move forward, to take responsibility, and to become a better version of yourself. The cost of self-deception is always greater than the cost of facing the truth, because while the truth may be uncomfortable, it is the only path to real freedom. So, when you think about the long-term consequences of continuing to deceive yourself, ask yourself, is it really worth it? The answer, as painful as it may seem in the moment, is always no. You might think that being honest with yourself is a given, but it's not always as simple as it seems. Being truthful with yourself requires effort, awareness, and sometimes a level of vulnerability that most of us try to avoid. And yet, it's one of the most powerful practices you can adopt for personal growth. The first step in practicing self-honesty is acknowledging that we all have biases, both conscious and unconscious, that shape the way we see ourselves and the world around us. These biases are often based on our fears, insecurities, or past experiences. They affect how we interpret situations and how we justify our actions. Recognizing this is key to starting the process of self-honesty. Without this awareness, you'll continue to operate on autopilot, justifying your behaviors, decisions, and beliefs without questioning whether they're true or helpful. The next challenge is accepting that being honest with yourself isn't about always being right or perfect. It's about seeing things clearly. It's about facing the reality of who you are, what you want, and what's actually happening in your life. We all have this tendency to sugarcoat things, to tell ourselves that we're better than we are, or that things are going better than they truly are. It's easier to live in a state of denial, but this form of self-deception comes at a cost. By avoiding self-honesty, you not only delay your growth, but also prevent yourself from truly understanding your strengths and weaknesses. It's not just about confronting your flaws either. Self-honesty requires embracing your entire self, both the parts you're proud of and the parts you'd rather hide away. We all have the good, the bad, and the ugly inside us, but pretending that only the good parts exist keeps you from real progress. If you want to grow, you have to acknowledge the full spectrum of who you are, not just the parts that are easy to accept. This is where the real work begins. It's uncomfortable, but it's necessary if you want to live authentically. This practice of self-honesty is crucial for making better decisions. When you lie to yourself, you make decisions based on a false understanding of your abilities, values, and limitations. When you're honest with yourself, you can make choices that are in alignment with your true self, even if those choices are difficult or uncomfortable. The problem with ignoring the truth is that you end up living in a way that doesn't serve you. For instance, you might tell yourself that you're fine with the job you're in, even though you feel unfulfilled and drained. Or you might convince yourself that a relationship is going well, despite the fact that there are glaring issues that have been swept under the rug. But when you practice self-honesty, you stop making excuses and start seeing things for what they are. You don't ignore the things that make you uncomfortable. Instead, you face them head on, and while this might seem like a difficult task, it's actually liberating. When you embrace the truth, you're no longer controlled by your fears, insecurities, or illusions. You have the power to change what's not working, and to take action based on a clear understanding of your situation. One of the benefits of this kind of self-honesty is that it fosters deeper self-awareness. Self-awareness is the foundation of personal growth. Without it, you're like a ship without a rudder drifting aimlessly, unable to navigate your way through life. When you're honest with yourself about your feelings, your goals, and your challenges, you have the clarity to chart your course and make decisions that are in alignment with your true purpose. This self-awareness allows you to see patterns in your behavior, recognize areas for improvement, and take responsibility for your actions. But honesty with yourself doesn't mean just acknowledging your weaknesses. It also involves recognizing your strengths. Too often, we downplay our achievements or abilities, perhaps because we're afraid of seeming arrogant or overconfident. But self-honesty requires that you give yourself credit where it's due. It's about accepting that you have value, that you have strengths to offer, and that you are capable of achieving great things. When you acknowledge your own worth, you build confidence, and with confidence comes the courage to pursue your goals, no matter how difficult they may seem. Self-honesty also plays a crucial role in how we relate to others. If you're not honest with yourself, you can't be truly honest with others. This creates a barrier in relationships, because people can sense when you're not being authentic. Whether it's in a romantic relationship, a friendship, or a professional setting, authenticity is the foundation of trust. When you're open and honest about who you are, it invites others to do the same. And when you engage in genuine, honest relationships, you build deeper connections, rooted in mutual respect and understanding. But here's the thing about self-honesty. It requires vulnerability, and vulnerability isn't something most people embrace easily. It means exposing the parts of yourself that are raw and unpolished, admitting your flaws and accepting that you're not perfect. This can be terrifying, but vulnerability is also a strength. It's through vulnerability that we grow, learn, and connect with others on a deeper level. When you're vulnerable, you stop hiding behind your carefully crafted image, and you allow the world to see the real you. Vulnerability also enables you to ask for help when you need it, to seek support when you're struggling, and to take ownership of your mistakes. It allows you to grow because you're no longer stuck pretending that everything is fine. Instead, you embrace the discomfort of growth, knowing that it's necessary to move forward. Self-honesty is about cultivating a deep sense of self-respect. When you lie to yourself, you're denying your own reality. But when you tell yourself the truth, you honor who you are, and you give yourself the freedom to evolve. It's not about being perfect or having it all figured out. It's about being real, accepting where you are, and having the courage to move forward. You stop letting fear dictate your choices, and you begin to live a life that's true to who you are. So the next time you find yourself avoiding the truth or justifying a decision that doesn't sit right with you, ask yourself, what am I afraid of? What am I trying to protect myself from? The truth might be uncomfortable, but it's the only way to live authentically, to grow, and to truly move forward in life. It's time to stop pretending, to stop hiding, and to start being honest with yourself. The moment you do that, you unlock the potential for true freedom and transformation. We all know that change is hard. In fact, it can feel almost impossible at times. But here's the thing about change. It's not only necessary for personal growth, it's often the only way to break free from the patterns of self-deception that hold us back. If you want to stop lying to yourself, you have to be willing to make the difficult changes that accompany facing the truth. Change is a process. It's messy, uncomfortable, and it doesn't always happen as quickly as we'd like. But without it, you remain stuck, running in circles, telling yourself that things will get better if you just keep doing what you've always done. The first step in any change is the recognition that you are, in fact, capable of it. This seems obvious, but it's actually one of the biggest barriers people face when trying to break free from self-deception. The reality is that most people think they're too broken, too far gone, or too set in their ways to change. But that's a lie. It's a lie we tell ourselves to protect our egos, to avoid the discomfort of stepping into the unknown, and to resist confronting the parts of ourselves we'd rather not face. But the truth is, change doesn't require perfection. It doesn't require you to be anything other than what you are in that moment. The willingness to change comes down to one fundamental thing: the decision to take responsibility. The moment you take responsibility for your actions, your choices, and your life, you unlock the power to make a different choice, to do things differently, and to start the process of change. The challenge with self-deception is that it allows us to keep running from responsibility. We tell ourselves that circumstances beyond our control are to blame, or that it's someone else's fault, or that we're victims of a world that doesn't treat us fairly. While external factors may certainly influence our lives, the moment we start shifting the blame elsewhere, we lose our agency. The only way to regain control is to take responsibility for our actions, our responses, and our choices. This doesn't mean blaming yourself for everything that goes wrong in your life, but rather acknowledging that no one else has the power to shape your life as much as you do. Once you take responsibility for your situation, you can begin to ask yourself the important questions. What have I been avoiding? Why am I lying to myself about this? What am I afraid of? This is where the real work begins. Because it's one thing to recognize that change is necessary, but it's an entirely different thing to be honest about the fears, insecurities, and emotional attachments that keep you stuck. These are the things that make change feel so difficult. These are the lies that we hold onto because they serve a purpose, even if that purpose is just protecting us from the discomfort of growth. For instance, let's say you've been telling yourself for years that you're content in your job, even though you've been feeling unfulfilled and uninspired. Maybe you've justified staying in that job because it provides security, or because it's what's expected of you, or because it's what everyone else thinks you should be doing. But the truth is, you're lying to yourself. Deep down, you know you're capable of more, that you could be doing something more meaningful or aligned with your passions. But change seems impossible. It's too risky. You might fail. You might disappoint others, and so you stay stuck in a situation that no longer serves you. But when you're willing to face that truth, when you're willing to look at the situation honestly, you can make a different choice. You can acknowledge your fears and face them head on. Yes, change is hard. Yes, it requires courage. But you don't have to do it all at once. Small steps taken consistently are often the most powerful. Acknowledge the truth. Take responsibility for your role in your own life. And then begin to move toward what you know is right, even if it's uncomfortable. This isn't to say that change will be easy. It won't be. It will require discomfort, vulnerability, and a willingness to fail. But that's where growth happens. The more you allow yourself to face the things you've been avoiding, the more you begin to break free from the lies you've been telling yourself. Every small step you take toward change is a victory, no matter how insignificant it may seem in the moment. And those small victories add up, building momentum that can eventually lead to profound transformation. But the key to lasting change is consistency. It's not enough to recognize that you've been lying to yourself and then hope things will magically improve. Change requires intentional effort. You have to actively work on confronting the lies you've told yourself step by step and make conscious choices that align with the truth of who you are. This means consistently questioning your motivations, checking in with yourself, and not allowing yourself to slip back into old habits. It's also crucial to understand that change doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's not something you do in isolation. If you want to break free from self-deception, you need to surround yourself with people who support your growth and challenge your lies. Seek out people who will tell you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Find a community that encourages honesty and authenticity, and be willing to be vulnerable with them. It's difficult to change when you're surrounded by people who are complacent or who enable your self-deception. Sometimes, change requires cutting ties with the people or environments that reinforce your old, unhelpful patterns. Along with that, you need to be patient with yourself. We live in a world that demands instant results, but the truth is that change takes time. It's easy to become discouraged when you don't see immediate progress. You might take a step toward self-honesty, only to find that you're slipping back into old habits or justifying your old behaviors. This doesn't mean you've failed. It just means you're human. Change is a process, and it often involves setbacks. What matters is that you keep moving forward. You keep acknowledging the truth, taking responsibility, and making small adjustments until those small changes add up to something profound. So, while change might feel intimidating, it's actually the key to unlocking the life you truly want to live. The process of confronting the lies you've told yourself, taking responsibility for your choices, and making intentional changes may be difficult, but it is also deeply rewarding. Every time you push through discomfort, every time you face the truth, you're stepping closer to the person you're meant to become. Change isn't easy, but it is the only way forward. And it starts with one simple decision: to stop lying to yourself. When we look at the world around us, it's easy to get lost in the noise. The constant distractions, the endless stream of information, and the pressure to live up to certain standards can make it feel impossible to understand what really matters. We get caught up in external expectations, and we forget to check in with ourselves to ask, what do I really want? What am I truly living for? This is where the need to stop lying to yourself becomes most crucial. The more we ignore our inner truths, the more we become disconnected from what really gives our lives meaning. The problem is, most people don't even realize they're lying to themselves. The lies we tell ourselves often feel like the truth, because they're rooted in the stories we've been telling ourselves for years. We justify our decisions, rationalize our actions, and convince ourselves that we're doing fine when deep down, we know that something's missing. So, how do we begin to face the truth of our lives? It all starts with self-reflection. We have to get honest about our desires, our fears, and our choices. And more importantly, we need to understand why we've been avoiding the truth. Why have we told ourselves that we're fine when we're not? Why have we convinced ourselves that our current situation is enough when we know deep down it isn't? Self-deception often arises as a defense mechanism. It's a way of protecting ourselves from discomfort, from the pain of facing reality, and from the fear of change. But here's the truth. Avoiding the truth never makes the pain go away. In fact, it only makes it worse. If you want to live a fulfilling life, you have to be willing to face what's really happening inside. You have to be brave enough to ask yourself those difficult questions. Am I truly happy? Am I living in a way that aligns with my values? Am I making decisions that reflect who I am, or am I just trying to please others? This is where real growth begins. Because until you confront these questions, until you're willing to accept the truth, even the uncomfortable truths, you'll remain stuck in the same patterns, living a life that doesn't truly reflect who you are or what you want. But facing the truth isn't just about confronting the bad things in your life. It's also about embracing the good. When we lie to ourselves, we sometimes downplay our own strengths and successes. We minimize our accomplishments, telling ourselves that they don't matter or that they're not enough. But self-deception isn't just about denying our flaws. It's also about denying our potential. We convince ourselves that we're not worthy of success, happiness, or fulfillment, that we don't deserve to go after what we truly want. And in doing so, we limit ourselves. Living authentically, then, is not just about identifying the things that aren't working. It's also about recognizing the things that are. When you're honest with yourself, you can begin to see the areas where you're succeeding, where you're growing, and where you're living in alignment with your true self. And when you see that, you build confidence. You realize that you're not just capable of making change, but that you're already doing it in small ways. Those small victories, however minor they might seem at first, are the foundation of long-term transformation. This brings us to another crucial point. Self-deception often keeps us from taking action. When we lie to ourselves, we convince ourselves that we're waiting for the right time, or that everything will fall into place eventually. But the truth is, the right time never comes unless you create it. You can wait forever for things to be perfect, but that time will never come. Change, growth, and success require action. They require you to stop telling yourself stories about why now isn't the right moment, and start taking responsibility for creating the future you want. This doesn't mean you have to take huge, overwhelming leaps right away. In fact, starting small is often the best way to go. But you have to start. You have to stop lying to yourself about the reasons you haven't made progress. You have to stop pretending that you don't have the power to change your life. The truth is, you do have that power. The question is, are you willing to take it? And it's important to remember that progress doesn't look the same for everyone. We're all on different paths, and we all have different goals. The key is to focus on your own journey, to stop comparing yourself to others, and to stop lying to yourself about where you are or where you should be. Everyone's life is unique, and the more you try to live according to someone else's standards, the more disconnected you become from your own truth. This is where self-compassion becomes vital. It's easy to beat yourself up when things aren't going as planned or when you feel like you're falling behind. But that kind of thinking is rooted in self-deception. It's rooted in the lie that you're not doing enough or that you're failing somehow. The truth is, you're exactly where you need to be in this moment. The fact that you're even questioning where you are shows that you're already on the path to growth. Self-compassion allows you to acknowledge where you are without judgment. It allows you to look at yourself honestly, accept your flaws and imperfections, and still love yourself. This is essential for making real change. If you can't accept yourself as you are, you'll never be able to move forward. You'll be stuck in a cycle of self-criticism and self-deception, telling yourself that you're not good enough or that you'll never make it. At the same time, self-compassion doesn't mean accepting mediocrity. It doesn't mean settling for less than you're capable of. It means recognizing your potential, being honest with yourself about where you are, and then taking the necessary steps to move toward the life you want. It's about giving yourself permission to grow and evolve, and knowing that you're worthy of doing so. Ultimately, the goal is to live a life that's true to who you are, a life that reflects your values, your desires, and your deepest truths. This doesn't mean everything will be easy or that you'll have all the answers, but it does mean that you're living with integrity. You're no longer lying to yourself about what matters. You're no longer pretending to be someone you're not, or waiting for a perfect moment to start living authentically. And when you start living this way, when you start telling yourself the truth, the world around you begins to shift. You begin to attract the right people, the right opportunities, and the right experiences. You begin to feel more at peace with who you are and where you're going. You'll find that over time, the lies you once told yourself no longer have the power to control you. You'll be living in a way that's true to your core, and that's where true fulfillment lies. It's a simple truth, but one that we often forget. You are the author of your own story. If you want to write a new chapter, it starts with facing the truth of where you are now and taking responsibility for the next step. There's no better time to start than today.